Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, a routine surgery turns into a life-altering moment when I discover my husband, Daniel, and my sister, Kate, in a betrayal that shatters everything. What follows is a journey of pain, healing, and forgiveness. As I rebuild my life and relationships with love and compassion, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest stories. It was a day I would never forget, not because of the moment that changed my life, but because it was the beginning of a journey that would define my ability to heal, to forgive, and to find compassion in the face of betrayal. I had been in the hospital for what felt like forever. A routine surgery had turned into complications, leaving me weak, fragile, and vulnerable. My husband, Daniel, had been by my side every day, his gentle presence the only thing that seemed to ease the pain of the sterile hospital room. But little did I know, something darker was taking place in the shadows of our lives. I had always trusted Daniel. He was my rock, my partner in every sense of the word. We'd been together for almost a decade, and I had never once questioned his loyalty or our love. But now, lying in that hospital bed, unable to move much, I began to notice things, small things, insignificant to the untrained eye, but to me, they were whispers of something wrong. I had always been close with my sister, Kate, one person who knew every detail of my life, every joy and every sorrow. She had been there for me when Daniel and I went through hard times, and I had always trusted her as my confidant. But in the days leading up to my surgery, I couldn't help but feel a shift in her. She had been spending more time with Daniel, and the chemistry between them was off. It wasn't anything overt, nothing I could put my finger on, but something felt different. The day after my surgery, I woke up in a haze of medication and exhaustion. My body was sore, my head heavy with the aftereffects of anesthesia. I was drifting in and out of sleep when I heard voices, soft voices, barely audible. The familiar hum of the hospital machines filled the room, but there was something in the air that made my heart race. I wasn't sure if it was the medication or if I was truly awake, but I could hear Daniel's voice, so tender and soft. Then, I heard Kate's voice, quieter but somehow more urgent. I pretended to be asleep, not wanting to interrupt, but unable to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I couldn't focus on their words, but I heard the subtle shift in tone, the way their voices became more intimate, the way they exchanged quiet laughter that didn't belong in that room. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps fading away. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to be asleep, wondering what had just happened, but my curiosity couldn't be contained. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window, the one I'd been staring at for days, trying to distract myself from the pain and loneliness. The curtains were slightly drawn, and through the glass, I could see them, Daniel and Kate, standing in the courtyard just outside the hospital. The world around me seemed to blur as my eyes locked onto the scene. Kate, my sister, was standing close to Daniel, their hands clasped together in a way that made my stomach drop. Then, Daniel leaned in, and in the soft light of the early evening, they kissed. It was slow, tender, and filled with a kind of intimacy that shattered my heart into a million pieces. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world around me spun out of control as I watched them, my sister, my husband, together in a way that made everything I thought I knew about my life come crashing down. For what felt like an eternity, I lay there, frozen in shock. My heart ached in a way I had never known. I had always been the one who believed in love, in loyalty, in the promises we make to each other. But now I was lying in a hospital bed, betrayed by the two people I trusted most. How could they betray me like this? But even in the midst of the pain, something deep inside me urged me to stay calm. I couldn't confront them now. I couldn't cause a scene, not in this fragile state. Instead, I let the tears fall quietly as I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep. I needed time to process this, time to think about what to do next. The following days were a blur. Daniel was by my side, but I could barely look him in the eye. I could feel his guilt hanging in the air, but he didn't speak of it. He was gentle with me, his touch tender, but every time he reached for my hand, I recoiled inwardly. I could see the way he kept glancing at Kate, and I could feel the weight of their unspoken words between us. It wasn't until several days later, when I was finally strong enough to sit up, that I knew I needed to confront them. I could no longer hide from the truth that was consuming me. Daniel, I said quietly, my voice shaky from the effort of speaking, I need to talk to you. He looked at me, his face pale, his eyes filled with something I couldn't read. Kate was sitting in the corner, her eyes avoiding mine. I could feel the tension in the room, thick and suffocating. About what? Daniel asked, his voice low. I swallowed hard, gathering all the courage I had left. I know what you did. I saw you, both of you, through the window. Daniel's face went ashen, and I could see the guilt wash over him like a tidal wave. Kate's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. Never wanted to hurt you, Daniel said, his voice cracking. It just happened. I don't know how to explain it, but I never meant for you to find out this way. Don't, I interrupted, my voice trembling. Don't try to justify it. You kissed my sister, Daniel. You betrayed me, and you betrayed the trust we built. How could you do this? There was silence for a moment, broken only by the sound of my heart breaking in my chest. Daniel's eyes filled with tears, but Kate remained silent, her face a mask of guilt. I don't expect you to forgive me, Daniel said softly, his voice filled with sorrow. But I love you. I never wanted to hurt you. I am so sorry. I shook my head, the tears streaming down my face. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, but you've hurt me in ways I never thought possible. Kate finally spoke, her voice small and filled with regret. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was confused, and I didn't know what to do. I'm so sorry. I've ruined everything. I looked at her, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had every right to be angry, but in that moment I felt nothing but sadness. Sadness for the love I had lost, for the bond I had once shared with both of them. I don't know what's going to happen now, I whispered, but I can't keep pretending that everything's okay. I need time to think, to process all of this. Over the following weeks, I took time for myself. I focused on my healing, both physically and emotionally. I needed space, not just from Daniel and Kate, but from the entire world that had come crashing down around me. I spent time with friends who supported me, and I rediscovered my own strength. A strength I never knew I had until I was forced to face this betrayal. One afternoon, after days of reflection, I called Daniel. He answered immediately, his voice tentative but hopeful. I've been thinking, I said, my voice steady, and I've realized something. I can't keep carrying this anger with me. I can't keep holding on to the past. I don't know if we can rebuild what we had, but I do know that I need to let go of this hurt. Daniel was silent for a moment, and then he spoke, his voice filled with gratitude. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. I love you, and I always will. I don't know if we'll ever be the same, I said softly, but I want to move forward with compassion, not just for you, but for myself. I don't want this to define me. The journey that followed wasn't easy. It was filled with difficult conversations, painful moments, and periods of doubt. But through it all, I held on to kindness. I chose to forgive, not because I owed it to them, but because I owed it to myself. I chose to heal, to rebuild my life with a focus on love, compassion, and understanding, even in the face of betrayal. Daniel and I never returned to the way things were, but we rebuilt a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect, trust, and a shared desire to move forward. Kate and I, too, found a new way to connect, though it would never be the same. But through it all, I learned that true healing comes from within. It comes from the courage to face the pain, to embrace the hurt, and to let go of what no longer serves you. And in the end, I found peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had learned to forgive. And in that forgiveness, I found the love and kindness I had been searching for all along. The weeks that followed were filled with moments of reflection, self-discovery, and the quiet rebuilding of my life. Every day was a challenge, a chance to choose healing over bitterness. As much as I had wanted to block out the pain of the betrayal, I realized that the only way to move forward was to face it head-on. It wasn't easy, but the path to peace required that I let go of the weight I had been carrying for so long. In the midst of this process, I started to rediscover parts of myself I had forgotten. I had spent so much of my life in the shadows of other people's expectations as a wife, a sister, a daughter. But now, I was learning to be just me again. I took up old hobbies I had abandoned, like painting, and spent time with friends who reminded me of the person I was before everything had shifted. The more I invested in myself, the more I began to heal. Daniel too was doing his own work. He moved out of our shared home and spent time trying to make amends, not only to me, but to the people he had hurt along the way. It was painful to watch him try to right his wrongs, but I could see the sincerity in his actions. He took responsibility for his mistakes, but there were no easy fixes. I had to come to terms with the fact that some wounds take longer to heal than others, and some may never fully close. One day, after a long conversation about our marriage, Daniel looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen in years. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I know I can never make up for what I did," he said quietly, his voice filled with a kind of acceptance. "But I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I betrayed you in the worst possible way. You didn't deserve that." I met his gaze, my heart still heavy but no longer consumed with anger. "I'm not forgiving you because you asked me to," I said, my voice steady. "I'm doing it for me. I can't carry this pain anymore. It doesn't serve me." He nodded, and for the first time I saw the man I had once fallen in love with. He wasn't the same as the one who had hurt me, but he was trying, and that was enough to start building something new, not just with him, but within myself. Through all of this, I couldn't forget about Kate. The betrayal cut deep, and I struggled with how to rebuild trust with her. She was my sister, but the boundaries between us had been blurred in a way that I wasn't sure could ever be fixed. She had apologized profusely, but words didn't seem to be enough. What hurt the most was that she had been the one person I had trusted to stand by me. The bond we shared felt fractured, and I wasn't sure how to put it back together. But over time, I came to understand something important. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. I couldn't expect everything to go back to how it was, but I didn't have to hold on to the anger either. I learned that forgiveness was as much for my own peace of mind as it was for the other person. It was about letting go of the past and making space for something new. Slowly, I allowed Kate back into my life, but not in the way I once had. It was a gradual process, one that required patience, vulnerability, and a willingness to acknowledge the pain without letting it control me. We started to rebuild our relationship, taking baby steps toward healing. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of doubt, but we tried, and that, I realized, was enough. As the months passed, I found myself in a new place, not just physically, but emotionally. I had faced the hurt, accepted the betrayal, and let it go. The love I had once felt for Daniel and Kate had shifted, but I could see the beauty in the journey I had taken. It wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was the life I was learning to embrace. One where kindness, compassion, and understanding had to start with me. One evening, as I sat in the quiet of my apartment, surrounded by my paintings and the warmth of soft lighting, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. I had learned so much about myself, about love, and about the importance of forgiveness. The past was still a part of me, but it no longer defined who I was. I had reclaimed my life, my heart, and my sense of self. It wasn't the love story I had envisioned, but it was the love story I needed. A story of healing, of growing stronger in the face of betrayal, and of discovering that even in the most painful of times, there is room for kindness, for compassion, and for new beginnings. A few months later, Daniel and I met for coffee. We were still working through the remnants of our past, but we had come to a place of understanding not just of each other, but of ourselves. He had found peace in his own way, and I had found mine. Our conversation was calm, filled with an appreciation for the shared history we once had, and an acknowledgement that we both had moved forward. "You've come so far," he said, his voice sincere. "I'm proud of you," I smiled, feeling a lightness I hadn't known in years. "I'm proud of myself too. We've both done the work, and we're better for it." As we parted ways that day, I felt a sense of closure, not just with Daniel, but with the version of myself that had been broken and betrayed. I had faced the truth, and now I was stronger, more whole than I had ever been. In the end, I realized that love isn't always about perfection. It's about resilience, about finding compassion and healing in the most unexpected of places. It's about knowing when to let go and when to hold on. And it's about understanding that, sometimes, the greatest love we can give is the one we show ourselves. I may have been betrayed, but I was no longer broken. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to step forward into a future, full of love, one that was defined not by the past, but by the person I had become. The journey that followed the conversation with Daniel was one I never anticipated. There were days of growth, and there were moments when I felt like I might fall back into the painful spiral of self-doubt and anger. But as time went on, something incredible began to happen. The more I worked on myself, the more I learned to love myself, the easier it became to forgive, not just others, but myself as well. I wasn't the same person who had been lying in that hospital bed, broken and betrayed. I had healed, I had risen, and now I was ready for what came next. But there were still questions. How would my relationship with Kate evolve? Would we ever go back to the bond we had before? Would I ever truly trust her again? These were the thoughts that lingered in my mind late at night, when everything else was still. And I found myself missing the closeness we once had. Kate reached out to me several times, but I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me was afraid of reopening old wounds, of inviting the pain back in. But deep down, I knew I couldn't heal completely without addressing everything, including her. So, one evening, I decided to meet with her. We sat at a small cafe, a neutral space where the weight of the past didn't feel so suffocating. The conversation was hard at first, full of awkward pauses and tentative words. Kate apologized again and again, but it didn't feel like enough. There was a deep sadness in her eyes, one I had never seen before. She had always been strong, the confident sister who could handle anything, but now she was vulnerable, unsure of how to repair the damage she had caused. I know I can't change what happened, Kate said, her voice trembling, but I want to try. I want to make things right, no matter how long it takes. I took a deep breath, looking at her, and for the first time in a long while, I really saw her not as the person who had betrayed me, but as the sister I had known for years. She was still the same person I had laughed with, cried with, shared secrets with. The betrayal hurt more than I could have ever imagined, but the love I had for her was still there, buried beneath the pain. I don't know if we can go back to how things were, Kate, I said softly, but I'm willing to try. For us, I don't want to live with this anger anymore. I want peace. Tears welled up in Kate's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I never wanted to hurt you. I've been so lost in my own guilt that I didn't even know how to reach out. But I'm so sorry, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to show you that I love you. That moment, simple as it was, felt like the first step in mending our relationship. It wouldn't be quick, and it wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about allowing room for healing, for growth. It was about making the choice to move forward, even when it didn't feel fair. Over the following months, Kate and I took small steps toward rebuilding our bond. It wasn't an easy process, and there were still times when I felt the sting of betrayal, but there were also moments of laughter, of shared memories, and of understanding that even though things had changed, our connection hadn't been entirely broken. It was like learning to walk again after a long injury. The pain was still there, but it was lessening, and soon, we would be stronger for it. Daniel and I, too, began to rebuild something new. We were no longer the couple we had been, but we were learning to coexist in a way that respected the past and looked forward to the future. We talked about our regrets, our mistakes, and our hopes for what lay ahead. It was difficult, but it was also necessary. I had no illusion that things would ever go back to the way they were, but we were building a new foundation, one that was honest and real. One evening, after a long conversation about everything, our marriage, our future, and what it meant to move forward, Daniel looked at me with a softness that made my heart ache. I'm sorry for everything, truly. I don't know what the future holds, but I want you to know that I'll always be here. For you, for whatever you need. I smiled softly, the weight of the past lifting a little. I don't know what the future holds either, Daniel, but I'm grateful for the time we've shared, and I'm ready to embrace whatever comes next. And I meant it. I was ready to let go of the past, ready to forgive, and ready to move forward with a heart full of compassion. Life, it seemed, was giving me a second chance, not just at love, but at healing, at understanding, and at learning to live with kindness, both for myself and for those around me. But it wasn't just Daniel or Kate I was learning to forgive. It was myself. I had spent so much time blaming myself, questioning my worth, thinking I was not enough. But as time went on, I came to realize that none of this was my fault. I hadn't caused the betrayal, I hadn't created the pain, and I certainly didn't deserve to carry that burden for the rest of my life. One day, I stood in front of the mirror, looking at the woman staring back at me. She was strong, resilient, and kind, and in that moment, I realized that I had found my own peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had learned to love and forgive myself. As I sat in the living room, surrounded by the people I loved and trusted, I knew that life had been difficult, but it had also been beautiful. I had been given a chance to heal, to forgive, and to rediscover the power of love, not just the love of others, but the love I had for myself. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that whatever came my way, I was ready to face it with an open heart, and that was enough. Because I had learned the most important lesson of all. Love, kindness, and compassion begin with oneself, and in that I found peace. As the days continued to unfold, I found myself growing more confident in my decisions. The weight of the past was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I was learning to embrace the present, the people I loved, and even the uncertainties of the future. The healing was gradual, but there was a newfound strength within me, a strength I never thought I would have after everything that had happened. Daniel, and I, although still finding our way through the remnants of our past, had begun to form a bond that was more honest, more real. There were no illusions anymore, no pretending everything was perfect, but there was something beautiful in the way we were rediscovering each other, not as the couple we once were, but as two people who had learned from their mistakes and were willing to give love another chance. It was on one quiet evening, after a long day of just being together, no grand gestures, no forced smiles, that I felt it, a softness between us that had been absent for so long. We sat on the couch, close, but not touching, talking about our days, our hopes for the future. It was a simple, intimate moment, but it felt like we were moving into uncharted territory. The silence wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. There was no pressure, just an understanding. Suddenly, Daniel turned toward me, his hand gently brushing against mine. My heart skipped a beat at the contact, as if my body had been waiting for this moment, even if I hadn't realized it. His fingers intertwined with mine, and for a moment we just held each other's gaze. The world outside didn't matter, it was just us, in that quiet, gentle space. "I've missed this," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. His thumb gently caressed the back of my hand, sending a ripple of warmth through my entire body. "I've missed you too," I replied, my voice softer than I intended, but it was true. In those simple moments, I realized how much I had longed for this connection, for the love we had once shared, even in a new form. It was raw, vulnerable, but beautiful. Without another word, Daniel slowly leaned toward me, his lips brushing mine in a kiss that was gentle, almost tentative at first. It wasn't hurried, there was no urgency in it, just a slow, deep exploration of a love that had been rediscovered. His lips moved against mine with a tenderness that made my heart flutter, and I could feel the years of pain, the brokenness, all melting away, leaving only the connection between us. As the kiss deepened, I felt something stir inside me, something that had been dormant for so long. The passion, the longing, the intimacy that I thought I had lost with the years of hurt. It was all coming back. His hands moved to my face, cupping it gently as if I were something precious, something he had lost and was now holding again. I pulled away slightly, breathless, needing to look at him. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice shaky, unsure whether I was ready for everything that this moment might bring. He looked at me with soft, searching eyes, his expression tender and filled with understanding. "I'm sure," he said quietly. "I've always been sure, even when we were apart. I've loved you from the beginning, and I'm here now, with you, only you." And with that, the uncertainty, the hesitation, faded. I leaned back into him, this time with a fiercer intensity, my hands running through his hair as he pulled me closer, his lips now claiming mine with a hunger I hadn't felt in so long. It was more than just a kiss now. It was the recognition of what we had once shared, and the understanding that what we had was worth fighting for, worth rediscovering. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer until I could feel the heat of his body against mine. The kiss deepened further, his touch more insistent, but still filled with that same tenderness, that same reverence. As his lips trailed down my neck, my breath caught in my throat. The way he touched me, the way he made me feel, was as if he had never left, as if we had never been apart. I could feel my heart racing, my body responding to him in ways that were both familiar and thrilling. It was as if all the lost years had led to this moment of reconnection, of rediscovered intimacy. "I've missed this," I whispered between breaths, my hands now exploring his body, tracing the lines of his shoulders, the hardness of his chest. I could feel the same longing in him that I felt, the desire to reclaim what we had lost. His eyes darkened with emotion, and without a word he stood, pulling me up with him. The kiss never broke, even as we moved toward the bedroom, our steps slow but purposeful, our bodies drawn together like magnets. Once inside, he gently but firmly laid me on the bed, his hands roaming over my body with a possessive tenderness that made my heart ache. He kissed me again, his touch now more urgent, as if he couldn't get enough. My own hands traced his back, feeling the strength in his muscles, the warmth of his skin beneath mine. We had both been through so much, but, in that moment, we were just two people, two souls that had found each other again, rediscovering the passion that had once been the foundation of our love. The years apart had only deepened the longing, and now, it was being released in every kiss, every touch. I could feel the heat between us building, and as his lips moved down to my neck, I gasped softly, my hands gripping the sheets as the sensations overwhelmed me. He whispered my name, his voice rough, filled with desire, and in that moment I knew that everything that had happened in the past, the betrayal, the hurt, the brokenness, had led to this moment of rediscovered love, of passion, of healing. We came together slowly, tenderly, but with a growing intensity that left no room for doubt. This was what we had been searching for all along, a love that was whole, that was real, that was passionate and pure. And in that love, I found everything I had been missing. When it was over, we lay tangled in the sheets, breathing heavily, our bodies still connected. I rested my head on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath my ear. He kissed my forehead gently, and I smiled softly, a sense of peace washing over me. "I love you," I whispered, my voice full of emotion. "I love you too," he replied, his arms tightening around me, holding me close. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that this was where I was meant to be, not just with him, but with myself, with the love we had found again, stronger, deeper, and more passionate than ever before. Our journey wasn't over, but we were ready for whatever came next. Together we could face anything, because our love built on kindness, compassion, and a rediscovered passion was unbreakable. As the days continued to pass, Daniel and I found a new rhythm in our lives together. The walls that had once separated us were slowly crumbling, piece by piece, until we were standing side by side once more. There was no rush, no urgency. Everything was happening at its own pace, and it felt right. We were no longer the people we had been when we first met, but in some ways, we were more real now. The past was still a part of us, but we weren't letting it dictate our future. Our intimacy, both emotional and physical, deepened each day. In the quiet moments, we talked about our dreams, our fears, and everything we had been through. There were no secrets between us now, only the truth. And in that truth there was healing. The connection we had once shared had been reignited, but now, it was built on a foundation of trust and understanding. We had become the people we needed each other to be. Not perfect, but perfectly imperfect. There was a depth to our love now, that came from having weathered the storm. We could laugh about the awkwardness of our first few days back together, remembering how difficult it had been to find our way. But we both knew that without those difficult moments, we wouldn't have arrived at this point of clarity. One evening, after a day spent running errands and sharing a quiet lunch, Daniel surprised me. We had finished dinner, and as I was cleaning up the kitchen, he disappeared into the living room. I assumed he was watching TV or playing on his phone, but when I walked into the room, I was greeted by something unexpected. He was sitting on the couch, holding something small and delicate in his hands. His eyes were soft as he looked at me, a smile tugging at his lips. He gestured for me to come closer. I approached, a curious smile on my face, unsure of what to expect. Daniel's eyes sparkled with affection, his gaze steady as he held the object out to me. I looked down at the small velvet box in his hands, and my heart skipped a beat. The world seemed to pause for a moment as I stood there, staring at him, and then at the box. "Open it," he said softly, his voice filled with warmth and affection. With trembling hands, I opened the box, revealing a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm, a crescent moon. "I remembered," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The mark, the one you saw on my wrist. You told me, once, that it always reminded you of something, and I wanted to give you something that could remind us of the connection we share, something that would carry that memory with us." My breath caught in my throat as I looked up at him. The weight of the gesture, the thoughtfulness behind it, touched me deeply. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I swallowed hard to keep them at bay. It was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of the love that had endured, of the connection that had remained despite everything. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, "this means more to me than you know." He reached for my hand, slipping the bracelet onto my wrist with a gentle touch. "It's just a small gesture, but it's a reminder of how far we've come, and how far we still have to go, together." I couldn't find the words to express the depth of my gratitude, so I kissed him instead, soft, slow, and full of all the love I had kept locked inside for so long. When we finally broke apart, I rested my forehead against his, my heart swelling with affection. "I love you," I whispered, "so much." "I love you too," he replied, his hands cupping my face, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had slipped down my cheeks. "And I always will. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The bond between us had grown even stronger, and I knew then that we had both found something worth fighting for. Our love had weathered the storm, and it was only becoming more beautiful with each passing day. As the weeks passed, I found myself falling deeper in love with Daniel. Not just because of the way he loved me, but because of the way he had chosen to heal with me. We had come to understand that love wasn't always easy, it wasn't always the fairy tale we had once imagined, but it was real, and it was built on patience, kindness, and compassion. We had been given a second chance, and we weren't going to let it slip away. One afternoon, as the sun set, casting a golden glow over the apartment, I sat beside Daniel on the balcony. We held hands, watching as the world continued its quiet rhythm below. The city hummed softly, but it felt like time had slowed for us. It was just the two of us, wrapped in the peaceful silence that had come to define our love. Daniel turned to me, his eyes filled with something deeper than words could express. "I never thought we'd be here, like this," he said, his voice low, filled with emotion. "But now that we are, I can't imagine my life without you." My heart swelled, and I leaned in, kissing him with the tenderness that had become so familiar, so cherished. This love was everything I had ever wanted, everything I had been searching for, and now, it was finally mine. We spent that evening wrapped in each other's arms, the world outside forgotten, and in that moment, I knew that love wasn't just about the passion, it was about the quiet moments, the understanding, the kindness, and the compassion that we gave each other. It was about building something lasting, something real, together. In the years to come, we would face challenges, both big and small, but we would face them as a team, with love as our guide. I had learned that love wasn't just about finding the perfect person, it was about building something imperfectly beautiful with someone who was willing to be there, through everything, with kindness, passion, and unwavering love. And so, as we sat together, watching the stars twinkle in the sky, I realized that this was just the beginning of our story, a story built on love, kindness, and the promise of a future we would create together. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Daniel and I continued to grow together, not just as partners, but as two people who had learned to love and accept each other fully, flaws and all. We found ourselves sharing more laughter, more adventures, and more quiet moments of contentment. The bond between us deepened, not just through the moments of passion, but in the small acts of kindness and compassion that filled our days. One sunny afternoon, after a particularly hectic week, we took a walk in the park, hand in hand. Air was warm, the sky a brilliant blue, and everything felt right. As we walked, Daniel stopped and turned to me, his eyes shining with a mixture of love and happiness. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice soft but certain, "about how far we've come. We've faced so much together, and yet, here we are, stronger than ever. I never thought I'd feel this peaceful, this at home, with someone again." My heart swelled with emotion as I looked at him. I reached up and cupped his face, my fingers brushing against the familiar scar that had once brought so much pain, but now symbolized something completely different. "I feel the same way," I whispered. "This love, it's not perfect, but it's ours, and that's all that matters." Daniel smiled, his eyes lighting up with affection. "I think we've found something rare," he said, pulling me closer. "Something worth holding on to, forever." And, in that moment, I knew he was right. We had built something strong and real, a love grounded in understanding, patience, and genuine connection. We had both learned how to let go of the past, embrace the present, and look forward to the future with open hearts. That night, after a quiet dinner and a peaceful evening spent in each other's arms, Daniel took my hand once more, his gaze full of tenderness and hope. "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing," he said, his voice steady and filled with conviction. "I want to spend it with you." Tears of joy welled in my eyes as I nodded. "I want that too," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I want to build a future with you. A future full of love, happiness, and all the wonderful moments we've yet to experience." As we stood there, in the quiet of the evening, wrapped in each other's arms, I knew that we had finally found the happiness we had both been searching for. The journey had been long, filled with pain and heartache, but it had led us here, to this beautiful, peaceful place of love, trust, and hope. And so, with love in our hearts and the promise of a future together, Daniel and I embraced the life we had built, knowing that whatever came next, we would face it together stronger, more in love, and ready for whatever the world had in store. The end of one chapter was just the beginning of another, and this time I knew that our story would have the happy ending we had both dreamed of.